coming home. Any place we wander to, any season we go through, I'll be fine as long as I'm with you. Heaven knows, running round the world with you. When you smile, I smile too. How I ever made it without you. Heaven knows, heaven knows. I feel the weather changing, better get out soon. Don't let go of my hand, no matter what you do. Well, I'm here for you, through the thick and thin. We're on a winding road that never ends. Any place we wander to, any season we go through, I'll be fine as long as I'm with you. Heaven knows, heaven knows. Running round the world with you. When you smile, I smile too. How I ever made it without you. Heaven knows, heaven knows.
We were just becoming friends. You took my hand for a dance, and I have loved you ever since.
Storm is on our heels and we'll be swept away. We better run, honey, what you say? Wanna be all alone, with you by my side. I can't believe you're mine. Oh, Colorado, where will we go? Oh, Virginia, I wanna show you. Anywhere I'll take you there. Heaven knows, heaven knows. Colorado, where will we go? Oh, Virginia, I wanna show you. I'll be fine as long as I'm with you. Heaven knows, heaven knows. I'll be fine as long as I'm with you. Heaven knows, heaven knows.
Peace, be still, my darling. All is well, my darling. Your anxious heart may as well be stone. Oh, it weighs you down deeper than you know. Yeah, it weighs you down deeper than you know.
Be still, my darling.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Sorry about that weird interruption of the countdown. That was my fault. I thought I could do a thing in the software while the countdown was going, but I can't. Turns out, as soon as the countdown is going, you got to just leave it. Leave it alone. Try to touch something like I did, and it just killed the countdown. So that's what the just blank screen was, and then we just like, well, let's just go. It's already after 11, so we're jumping in. So, hey, I want to say good morning to those of you I see who are on. Good morning, Stephen. And if you're watching as well, Michael and Wesley, good morning. Hi, Amanda and Ray. Hi, Mike. Hi, Rudy. Hi, Mackenzie. Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Luana. This is good to see you all here with us on this beautiful, hot, it's continued to be hot San Diego. We got a nice glistening glow for you, which I'm sure just matches your experience at home as well. And also, good morning, Lisa. Good morning, Irma Jean, which is also known as my mom. Good morning, Mom. Hey, and before we get going, I want to wish a very special happy anniversary to my beautiful bride and co-pastor, Kate Christensen Martin, who isn't with us here in the space this morning. Otherwise, I might look at her, or she'd probably just be up here with her. But we're celebrating our 17-year wedding anniversary today, August 23rd. I just think that's really fun. Thank you for the woo and the who.
Happy anniversary.
So that's wonderful. We are Sojourn Grace Collective, and this is our Sunday morning live virtual service. We're continuing our summer series that we've been calling Meaning in Movies, where we watch a film together and then we kind of explore it during our message time to talk about meaning of life and finding meaning in life and transformation and growth and a little bit of the Enneagram. And like we say each week, if you haven't seen the film, it doesn't really matter, because really we're just sort of grabbing these things out of the film to sort of talk about and explore, almost unrelated to the film in some ways. So I hope you stay with us. Behind us we have Matthew, Karen, and Ben, as always, who provides this beautiful space for us to not only hold our services on Sunday morning, but also create this sort of sacred space emotionally and spiritually as they perform music for us. And you can get the lyrics to the songs that we sing together at sojourngrace.com/virtual. But I'm going to turn it over to them this morning to share some music. I hope you are well, or as well as you can, and I'll be back here in a bit. Love you.
All my favorite people are broken. Believe me, my heart should know. And some prayers are better left unspoken. Just wanna hold you and let the rest go.
All my friends are part saint and part sinner. Yeah, we lean on each other and try to rise above, but not afraid to admit that we're all still beginners. We're all late bloomers when it comes to love.
All my favorite people are broken. Believe me, my heart should know. Orphan believers, skeptical dreamers, step forward. You can stay right here. You don't have to go.
You receive just some burdensome gift. It gets so hard to lift yourself up off the ground. Yeah, but the poet says we must praise the mutilated world. We're all working the graveyard shift. You might as well sing along, sing along. All my favorite people are broken. Believe me, my heart should know. As for your tender heart, this world's gonna rip it wide open. It ain't gonna be pretty, tears and some prayers are better left unspoken. I just wanna hold you and let the rest go.
Welcome. Shall I welcome the people?
Who's gonna welcome?
Welcome to Virtual Church. Hi, you're here. You've made it. If you've clicked on this little box in your Facebook feed or on YouTube, you have done everything that is required for you to belong here in this space. You are welcome. However you come here this morning, whether you are wrestling in the middle of something deep and hard, whether you are just over the moon excited because you love being super hot in the summer and it's happening to you right now and this is your dream, that's okay.
I question your feelings.
No,
but
it all belongs. We're gonna make space for you too. Whoever you are, whoever you love, however you identify, wherever you come from, whatever your history is, we're glad you're here. We believe that you are fully and completely loved exactly as you are. So we're gonna sing some more songs, because that's what you do.
some more very traditional church songs.
Super churchy.
Like we always do here at Sojourn.
Yep.
Lying in my bed, I hear the clock tick and think of you. Caught up in circles, yeah, confusion is nothing new. So flashback, warm days almost left behind. Suitcase of memories, time after.
Sometimes you picture me, I'm walking too far ahead. You're calling to me, but I can't hear what you say. And you say, go slow, as I fall behind. The second hand unwinds. If you're lost, you can look and you will find me. Time after time. If you fall, I will catch you. I'll be waiting. Time after time. After my picture fades and darkness has turned to gray, watching through windows, you're wondering if I'm okay. Yeah. Secrets stolen from deep inside. Yeah, the drum beats out of time. If you're lost, you can look and you will find me. Time after time. If you fall, I will catch you. I'll be waiting. Time after time. If you're lost, you can look and you will find me. Time after time. If you fall, I will catch you. I will be waiting. Time after time. Time after time. Time after time. Time after time.
Wait, who does that song? I almost said great song by
Cindy.
Lauper.
Cyndi Lauper. Thank you, Cindy, for sharing that with us so we can share it. I don't know a lot of things about music outside of 1990s CCM and 1990s pop, hip hop.
Everyone
That's about all
has
I
to
know.
be good at something.
Well, hey, everyone. This is the time. What'd you say, Karen?
I said everyone's good at something. so-
Thank you. Everyone is good at something. This is the time of our service that you could solve one question. Oh, wait, last week, this is when my mic cut off. So now I'm wondering, can you guys hear me?
It looks
So just
like it.
sound off if you can hear me, or Ben will go look.
Oh, no, lost the sound.
Lost the sound. Okay, so go down to and just unmute. I imagine the Scarlet got muted.
It's there now. I just muted it again.
I was back. All right, I don't know why when I try to do these question of the days, the audio disappears. I thought I solved it, but it doesn't matter. The question is, if you could go back and solve one question or mystery, maybe it's why did the sound disappear? Maybe that's the mystery you would solve.
That's
Would you go back
helpful.
in the past in any sort of mystery or question? What would you want solved? What would you want solved? All right, we'll see you back here in 2 minutes and a few odd seconds.
I love to wake up in the morning, but keep dreaming without wording. The day is gone. And sometimes I take a walk, then I forget about the clock. I can slow down. My friends are sitting laughing, but I just keep on napping. They're knocking on my door, but I'm knocking them down. They say I'm acting crazy, but I just wanna lie in the sun. Whoa, lie in the sun. Now I've been to many places and won so many races. I was a child, yeah. But now my only win is now, and my only wear is when I'm by your side. My friends are sitting laughing, but I just keep on napping. They're knocking on my door, but I'm knocking them down. They say I'm acting crazy, but I just wanna lie in the sun. Lie in the sun, yeah. Lie in the sun, yeah. My friends are sitting laughing, but I just keep on napping. They're knocking on my door, but I'm knocking them down. They say I'm acting crazy, but I just wanna lie in the sun. Whoa, I just wanna lie in the sun. Yeah, lie in the sun. My friends are sitting laughing, but I just keep on napping. They're knocking on my door, but I'm knocking them down. They say I'm acting crazy, but I just wanna lie in the sun.
All right, so I think I picked a question that maybe was a little too hard to respond to. We were having a hard time thinking of what are other than like who shot JFK and what happened to Bigfoot. It was hard to think about questions. So that's my fault for maybe not making a more user-friendly question of the day. But still, we had some good ones here, such as Austin would like to know how the Scooby-Doo gang funded their adventures. I think that's fair. Did they
Yeah.
even have jobs? Like, where did all the equipment and stuff come from? Stephen wants to know about Amelia Earhart and Atlantis, and maybe are they connected? Well, I added that part. I don't think Stephen wants to know about the connected.
Oh, there's a whole realm of the internet for that, I'm sure.
Irma wants to know why Joanne's had to put customer number system in place. It's not the DMV. Yep, that sounds important. Thanks for everything. It all belongs here. You are welcome.
I
here.
relate to that, actually. I affirm
Kristen,
that.
where are the unicorns? So your working assumption is that there were, and since there's not anymore, where do they go? What happens to them? What killed the dinosaurs? Yeah, Laura, I think that's a good one. What did kill the dinosaurs? And Kate Christensen Martin says that she likes you humans. That is not a mystery to be solved. In fact, Kate said, don't solve the mysteries. She likes them unsolved. That's fantastic. Hey, later on in our gathering, we're going to take communion together. I've got here some guava nectar and also a piece of honey wheat bread. And these will be my elements, and you are free to grab whatever elements you can find or are near you, just something to drink and something to eat. And again, the idea is not that they have to be the exact perfect elements. In many ways, that idea created this restrictive barrier that only some people could engage with the communion elements and others could not. And we at Sojourn, we say everyone belongs. There is nothing that restricts you from access to the divine. And so part of how we even embody that, even in this time of quarantine, is taking communion with some obscure elements to remind us that there is no separation between you and the divine. I'm going to turn it back over to our lovely musicians, and here we go.
When all your hopes are shattered and you feel like your soul is a sea, your dreams don't seem to matter, your heart is bruised and battered, you can't feel anything. Love anyway. Love anyway. When your world has gone to hell, no story left to tell. Love anyway.
Like I've been a long lost pilgrim, built my home on fragile faith, been the victim and the villain, still a father to my children, an owner of a heart that's slow to change. Love anyway. Love anyway. When your world has gone to hell, no story left to tell. Love anyway. Broken promises, truth and consequence, pride and tenderness, all those failed attempts, joy and happiness, joy and happiness, joy and happiness. Love anyway. When your world has gone to hell, no story left to tell. Love anyway. When your world has gone to hell, no story left to tell. Love anyway.
I wonder if you'll practice something with me. Invite you, if you want to watch, or I'm sorry, if you're watching and you want to close your eyes, I'm going to close my eyes because I'm going to do a quick meditation. Quick meditation, is that an oxymoron? And maybe closing your eyes will help to eliminate some of the distraction. And here's what I would like to draw our minds to. First, let's just take a deep breath together. In through your nostrils. And exhale. And maybe kind of notice your body if you haven't yet really paid attention to it today, or maybe just recently notice how you're sitting or where you're sitting, or if you're standing, maybe doing dishes or folding laundry or going on a walk. However you might be listening or watching, kind of just notice your body for a second. Where does it tingle? Where does it ache? Where is it hot? Take a deep breath in and out. And as the band just sang that song, and the lyrics say, when your world has gone to hell, and you've no story left to tell, the invitation is to love anyway. And here's what came up for me. I was thinking about the times in my life where my world did go to hell. I was living in a hell on earth. And when I was thinking about those times, what came to mind for me was the individuals around me, family members, the friends, who showed me great love in the midst of my hell. So what I thought we would do this morning for this time of meditation and prayer is to invite us to call to mind a person or people that in our life has shown us great love in the midst of our great suffering. So if you can, and if it's safe for you, think of a season of your life that was very challenging, that was very painful, that was very hard for you. And can you think of someone who, in that time, helped carry you, helped sustain you, helped ground you through their love? Maybe that love came in the form of words. Maybe that love came in the form of helping tangibly with groceries or bills. Maybe that love came in the form of just being with you and sitting with you and not trying to solve or answer anything, but just knowing that, letting you know that you weren't alone. Maybe that love came in the form of wisdom. Can you think of someone who helped sustain you during that time? And then what I invite you to do is to hold that person in your mind. Picture their face. Picture their name. And if it doesn't already, I invite you to even put a smile on your face as you think of this person. Just smile. Smiling has a way of kind of inviting the whole body to pay attention, to perk up, even if only for a moment. Smile. Hold this person in your mind, smile. And as you take in your next breath, I invite you to breathe in almost as though you're breathing in that person's love that they showed you, that you can remember showing you. And then as you breathe out, maybe you would send them in your thoughts, in your prayers, with your energy, with your whatever it is, send them some loving kindness right now. That wherever they're at, that maybe they would, even in this moment, feel a piece of the love that they have shown you. So breathe in and remember how they have loved you. And then breathe out and send them back that love. One of the great gifts of this life is how it seems there are often the people that come along at just the right time, in just the right way. When our world has gone to hell and there's no story left to tell, there's people that love us anyway. With that person still in your mind, take another deep breath in. Receive the gift of love that they've shown you and breathe out. Wishing them wellness and peace and joy. And so, God, I say thank you. Thank you for these people that have been coming to my mind in the last few minutes, that have loved me and loved me well. And with whatever I have right now, I send them love and light and peace and joy. May they know they are loved in the same way that they have reminded me that I am loved. Amen.
This is how it seems to me. Life is only therapy. expensive and no guarantee. So I lie here on the couch with my heart hanging out, frozen solid with fear, like a rock in the ground. But you move me, yeah. You give me courage I didn't know I had. You move me, oh. Can't go with you and stay where I am, so you move me. Here is how love was to me. I could look and not see, no, no. Going through the emotions, not knowing what they mean. And it scared me so much that I just wouldn't budge, no, no. Might have stayed there forever, if not for your touch. But you move me, yeah, out of myself and into the fire. You move me, oh, burning with love and with hope and desire. How you move me. You go whistling in the dark, making light of it, making light of it. And I'm following my heart, laughing all the way. Oh, 'cause you move me, yeah. You get me dancing and you make me sing. You move me. Now I'm taking delight in every little thing. How you move me. Oh, you move me. Oh, you move me. Oh, you move
Your grandfather wanted you to have this photograph for your collection.
Who is Augustine? Grandma?
Jonathan is traveling halfway around the world
You my translator?
Forgive my speaking of English, Jonathan, as I'm not so premium with it.
to search for the woman who saved his grandfather in World War II.
It's my grandfather, Saffron.
And this is Augustina?
This is our driver.
Please, do not be distressed. This is only driver seeing eye, bitch.
Wait, he's blind?
Only he thinks this.
Father informs me you are writing a book about this trip.
I'm not a writer, more of a collector.
And what do you collect?
Things. Family things.
In a world far from ordinary,
It's nice.
Make sure to secure the door when I'm gone. There are many dangerous people who want to take things from Americans and also kidnap them. Good night.
in a place far from home,
I'm a vegetarian.
You're a what?
I don't eat meat.
Pork?
No.
Chickens?
No.
And what about the sausage?
No meat.
What is wrong with you?
one man's quest for the truth
Why do you do this?
Sometimes I'm afraid I'll forget.
is about to unlock a secret
It is not so unusual,
What?
not knowing.
that will change all of their lives.
Yes, I submit to you perhaps a relatively obscure choice for a movie selection this week, but it has been, over the last 15 years, one of my favorite movies. And I thought, you know what, I've never had a chance to really unpack it in the way like I'm going to here, and so thanks for humoring me for those of you who did watch it. I put on our Sanctuary page, which is our private Facebook group for our church, I put, look, if you paid the $3 to rent it and you didn't like it, I'll pay you back. I'll reimburse you. It's a little bit of a money back guarantee that you will enjoy the film. And if not, you look, as we discovered last week with some people at our church, not everybody's going to love all the movies that we choose. And that's fine. Everything here belongs. But this movie, Everything is Illuminated, is taken from the book of the same title, written by Jonathan Safran Foer. And you know what? Like I say, with all these, like you said, with all these weeks in this series, Meaning in Movies, even if you haven't watched the movie, it's okay. Hopefully you still will receive something helpful, inspirational, encouraging, thought-provoking in what I'm about to say. So hang with me here if you haven't watched the movie, and if you have watched it, then I'd love to know kind of what you've been thinking about some of the questions that we're going to go through. We've been going through 6 questions for each movie. So quick synopsis of the film for those of you who haven't seen it, which I'm guessing is a lot of you. Jonathan Safran Foer, who is the author of the book and who is played by Elijah Wood in the movie, is a young Jewish-American man who's obsessed with collecting things, particularly things that have to do with members of his family. But there's one family member in particular that he has very little from, and that's his grandfather. And as his grandmother is passing away, she gives Jonathan, and you saw it in the trailer there, this old photograph of his father grandfather when he was young, standing next to a girl in a village out in the obscure countryside of Ukraine, and the girl's name is Augustine. And so Jonathan then takes this photograph and goes on a quest, a very rigid search, as it's called in the movie, hoping to find this village from his grandfather's past. And maybe even the young girl in the photograph, Augustine, the one who, as the story goes, helped Jonathan's grandfather escape the village before the Nazis came in during World War II. And so this movie is all about this quest of Jonathan trying to find this obscure village, trying to find this woman in the photograph, trying to find some link to his past. And it's also about this merry band of travelers that Jonathan connects with, the tour guides for Jonathan. You have Alex, who's his Russian interpreter, whose English is not so premium. You have Alex's grandfather, who thinks he's blind. And you have his seeing eye dog, known as Sammy Davis Jr. Jr. And the 4 of them travel around in the hills of Ukraine searching for this long-lost village. And all along the way, they learn more about themselves. They learn more about each other. And it really is a beautiful film. Even if you watch it just for the polka music, I highly recommend it. The music is so much fun. And eventually the group does find this village known as Trachtenbrod, thanks to this woman who lives, you saw in the trailer, in this field of sunflowers. This woman, they learn, was the one survivor from the village of Trachtenbrod back when the Nazis came through. And this one woman, who's the sole survivor, helps them to uncover their past and discover who they are. Okay, so it's a great film. That's my quick synopsis, and now I'm going to dig into some of these questions, and I'm going to do them a little bit in a different order than I've been doing in the past, and that's because I really wanted to end with some of the thoughts that came up on the first question. So here is where I'm going to begin today. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go with question. This is the question I'm starting with, and it is, how did you see yourself and or your story in this movie? So speaking to me, how did I see myself in this story? Here's how that worked for me. So Alex, who was the young Russian guy who was the interpreter for Jonathan, Alex had in the film one version, one idea of history as given to him by his family and his culture. And as you find out in the movie, this idea of history was that he didn't realize that Ukraine during World War II was also an unsafe place for Jews. In his mind, it was just Germany that was unsafe, not Ukraine. And so he has to confront this, that even in Ukraine there was this Nazi presence and it was unsafe to be Jewish during World War II in his very own country. And so in Alex's version of his story, he was entirely severed from this past of his, entirely severed from this roots, as you find out in the end of the film, spoiler alert, but there's going to be lots of spoilers, his grandfather actually was Jewish. He grew up in the town of Trachtenbrod, and he deflected and he left the village and gave up all of his Jewish roots. and lived the rest of his life as though he weren't Jewish. And so then as generations are grown, and Alex then grows up, Alex has no idea that he is part Jewish and that his whole family is Jewish. Nobody in the family does, because the grandfather cut that part of their history out. And so Alex not only didn't know that Ukraine was unsafe for Jews in World War II, but he also didn't know that he himself had Jewish roots and what that meant. So for me, as I'm watching this, in a similar way, I grew up with one very particular version and history of America, and one very particular version and history of my religious tradition, Christianity. The version of America that I was given in history books and in movies and in music and in culture was entirely centered around the idea of whiteness. The version of America that I was given erased all of our theft of land. It erased our annihilation of the native peoples here in America. The version of history of America that I was given gave this kind of just surface level tip of the hat to slavery. Like, yeah, that was a thing in the past, but thank God that doesn't really affect us anymore. Like, that's behind us. Thank God that's not a thing that we have to deal with anymore. This was the version of my American roots and history that I was given. And then as it relates to the Christian history, the version that I was given, the story that I was told, was that the Catholics had messed everything up. Now, Jesus and the disciples got this pure version of religion up and going, and then the Catholics came along and screwed everything up. But thankfully, we had Martin Luther in the year 1517 to nail his 95 Theses to the door of the Catholic Church and inaugurated the Protestant Reformation, which then solved everything. Not only that, even in my narrow Baptist tradition, there was even a finer, narrower scope of, even the Baptists, though, preserved the best version of Christianity from within the larger Protestant movement, which saved it from the Catholics. This was the version. I can even remember Baptist professors in my college sort of peddling this version of that. Somehow the Baptists and the Baptists alone had managed to secure and procure this strain of truth within Christianity, and we've saved it through the last 2,000 years. Any blemishes in the past, like the Crusades, yeah, that was just the Catholics' problem. They messed it up. Again, it's in the past. Thank God we don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. We could just wipe our hands clean of it. Within our own Christian tradition, there didn't seem to be any acknowledgement that our country's history with things like manifest destiny and chattel slavery were all justified by particular readings of my tradition's holy text. None of this was really given any attention or credence. So as I watch this movie, I'm confronted with the power of story, that it matters what stories we tell, and it matters what stories we are telling. In the movie, it mattered that the grandfather chose to abandon his Jewish roots and tell an entirely different story with his life, severed from his past, not being honest with his past. This led to generations of their family not knowing their roots and not even understanding their own country. And I love how then at the end of the movie, it mattered so much to the family that once they did discover that they were part Jewish, that one of the closing scenes is burying their grandfather. And I love that their grandfather now has on his tombstone had the Jewish Star of David and had his Jewish name carved back into the tombstone, and all the family members were wearing the yarmulkes, and just this beautiful sort of recapturing of their roots. And so I really resonated with that part of the story of feeling a little bit lied to about the history of my country and a little bit lied to about the history of my religion. And I think it matters that we uncover these things, and it matters that we tell the truth of our past. It matters the stories that we are telling.
Laura brought up that witch trials is another thing that was justified.
Yes. Thank you. So I've got Karen off screen here helping me know some of how you're interacting and engaging so that I can stay focused on the camera. And she says that, Laura, yeah, you pointed out the witch trials. Yeah, another thing in our country's history that was justified. There was found some obscure verses in the Bible to justify that sort of atrocity. And we haven't really been honest with that, and not in any significant sort of way. Anything else before I move on to the next question?
I think you can move on.
Okay. All right. Next question. Here we go. Question is, what truths about transformation did I notice in this film? What truths about transformation? So Alex, again, who's the young man, who's the English to Russian interpreter, his English is broken, and his English is also outdated. So the English that he does know was like probably 20 or 30 years behind culture, like the culture and the English. It's just very broken, and so that's part of the delight of the film is to watch him sort of how he phrases things, and it's in a fun, lighthearted way that, again, if you haven't seen it, you'll watch it and you'll know what I mean. But he talks about being proximal with people. Are you proximal with them? Which is to say, are you close with them? And here's what this movie illuminated for me, everything's illuminated, about transformation. If we ever hope to really understand people who are not like us, could be culturally, could be ethnically, could be religiously, if we ever hope to really understand people different from us, then we must be proximal with them. There has to be some closeness there. We have to get to know them. In the opening line of the film, Alex narrates, and he's telling the beginning of the story, and he says that he used to believe that Jewish people had SHIT between their ears for brains. So this was the story that he believed growing up, that they just weren't very smart. And then, of course, fast forward to the end, and he realizes that he is Jewish. Again, like I said, his whole grandfather hid it. So you see this transformation of him sort of thinking that Jewish people were just sort of there. Then throughout the whole movie, Jonathan Safran Foer, who's the Jewish American that comes over and tours Ukraine, they build this beautiful bond and relationship. And it's through this proximity, finally, Alex begins to actually know a Jewish person. He gets to know them and gets close with them, that he begins to understand and see them as more than just this gross mischaracterization of someone who's different from he. I've been rereading Howard Thurman's book from 1949. It's called Jesus and the Disinherited. And I've been thinking a lot lately about the chapter that he wrote titled Hate. And he explores this whole idea of hatred. And in the chapter, he outlines these 4 stages of how it is that we become, as he calls, hatred walking upon the earth. And the first step, Howard suggests, the first step to sort of how hatred emerges in our life and in the world, is when we have contact with other people that are different than we are, but don't have fellowship with them. He says contact without fellowship. In other words, we might have proximity to them, but we're not proximal with them. We know that they exist, but we don't know them. We don't understand them. We don't have fellowship with them. I don't know that you would argue with me that in today's shrunken globalist world, we have almost instant and total awareness of all sorts of people and people groups and identities. We are aware of them. We know they exist. We have contact with them. But how much do we really know about them? How much fellowship do we have with them? Or like Brene Brown says, it's hard to hate people up close. Once you really get to know someone, or once you really get to know a group of people or some sort of identity, once you get to know them, suddenly the ground for hatred becomes far less fertile. We grow, we transform by learning and understanding about others, especially those who are different from us, especially those that we might be in contact with, but not necessarily have fellowship with. And I've learned this to be true about my own life as it relates to transformation, and I thought this film really beautifully showed this dynamic as well. Before I go on to the next question.
Quiet today.
All right, quiet today. That's fine. Maybe it's because they've pulled up the movie and they're watching the movie while the live stream's going, which is the right move. All right, moving on to the next question. Wonderful. Next question is, what unhealthy narratives and or stereotypes were exposed or perpetuated in this film? So there's a narrative that exists that says, well, since I love people like this, or since I'm in relationship with people like that, then there's no way that I can say offensive things about them or participate in their perpetual oppression. I can't say offensive things about these people. I love people like that. Or I can't participate in oppression of discourse because I have friends who are like that. And there's this scene in the film where Jonathan, again, the young Jewish American guy played by Elijah Wood, and Alex, his Russian interpreter, they're talking about the grandfather's dog, Sammy Davis Jr. Jr. is the name of the dog. And Jonathan mentions to Alex that Sammy Davis Jr., of which the dog is named after, was Jewish. which shocked Alex. He turns to his grandfather and he says, Jonathan claims that Sammy Davis Jr. was Jewish. And the grandfather says, that's not possible. And Alex says, my grandfather says this is not possible. Sorry, we're getting some real static. All right, you're welcome. That was a fun, exciting moment, but I think we solved it. All right, so there's this scene. I'm trying to set this scene where Jonathan tells Alex that Sammy Davis Jr. was Jewish. He says, no, this is not possible. And then he says, yes, no, he converted to Judaism. He's America's most famous black Jew. And in this story, Alex, again, whose English is broken and whose culture and English is behind by 20 or 30 years, he as he talks about African American people to Alex, he keeps calling them Negroes. He keeps saying Negroes. And finally, Jonathan says, you can't say that word. They're African American. Stop saying that word. And Alex says, well, what is wrong with them? He says, but I dig them all the way. They are premium people. And Jonathan tries to convey to him, yeah, right, but the word, we just don't say that word anymore. They're African Americans. But there's this moment where Alex seems surprised that he could possibly say something that would be disparaging to a group of people because he digs them all the way. They're premium people. He loves the Shaquille O'Neal and the Michael Jackson, as he calls them. And I think this happens a lot. This happens a lot where we think, oh, I have a black friend, so I can't be racist. Or I have a gay friend, so I can't be homophobic. And I think, okay, yes, on one hand, that does matter. This is true. Like, it does matter to be in close proximity with people. Like I just said, this is how you learn about others. This is how you begin to understand people are different from you, is you develop friendships. So yes, it's not nothing to have friends of different identity groups. Yes, this is true. And even in our well-intentioned ways, even if we think they're premium people, we dig them all the way, we can still find ourselves perpetuating harmful ideas and stereotypes. Just being friends with people who are different than us does not inoculate us from potentially saying things that are continually harmful and offensive or perpetuating systemic injustices. So there's something to be said for being aware and open to the idea that we may need to update how we think. We may need to update how we talk. We may need to update how we advocate for entirely new systems. That just being friends with people or just having people that are different from us who are close to us does not inoculate us from this. In fact, this just came up for me recently. There's someone I'm friends with on the social medias, and she recently shared a post which talked all about how for many women, their experience online, when they're engaged in a sort of multi-person thread conversation interaction, that many women have the following experience, where they will engage with the point. They will ask a question or make some sort of point, and then the men in the thread will act as though the women never really engaged at all. They will just sort of ignore and maybe engage with other men in the thread. Or they will not ignore, but they will sort of restate what the woman said as a way to be like, hey, think about this, and then they basically just say word for word what the woman said. And so my friend, she said, hey guys, if you're reading this, I'd like you to consider this. Consider the following, that this is a real experience and phenomenon that happens for a lot of women. And we're just sort of ignored in these online threads, oftentimes even by well-intentioned people like myself. I love women. I dig them all the way. They're premium people. And I had to acknowledge that, yeah, actually that's a thing that I do. I might engage more with the men in the thread, or I might just sort of restate what the woman said. If I notice that she's getting ignored, I'll be like, well, here's this point, and I'll restate it so that it gets clarified. And what my friend urged us men to do was to say, point back to and say, hey, can you acknowledge, like, think about what this gal said. Acknowledge what this gal said. Look here. Anyway, so that was one way that I was like, once again reminded that just because I obviously have women who are friends. I dig them all the way. This does not inoculate me from perpetuating and being a part of patterns of behavior that are harmful. And I can always be doing better. So I love that little part of the film, and I think that sort of theme shows up quite a bit. And yeah, so that was fun for me to watch. Anything to engage with?
They're all waiting for you to talk about the ending. They got questions, comments, and concerns.
Oh, yes. Okay, we'll get to the ending in a minute. Here, real quick, let's talk about the Enneagram as I wipe the sweat from my brow. So I am curious, for those of you who watched the movie, if you have any sort of thoughts on the what Enneagram types these characters might be. And if you did watch the movie and you have thoughts, just sound off in the comment and we'll loop back to you. But I don't want to spend a whole lot of time here. But I thought Jonathan, who was the lead protagonist, I typed him as a 5 because he's a collector. He's a collector of things, a collector of information. And so he's just constantly seeking data and information. And he's got this whole board of things about his family, trying to bring it all together. Oh, thank you. Look, I get a paper towel to dab my perspiration. Alex, I typed as maybe a 7 or a 3. No, it's fine. We're good. Thank you. You're sweet. And you have some grapes. Alex, I typed as a 7 or a 3. And then the grandfather and his dog, Sammy Davis Jr., I typed as 8. Sort of this grisly, grouchy, like the dog, it just barks at everybody, real aggressive. But then the moment you sort of give it any sort of love, then it just becomes instantly yours forever. And the dog just sort of sidles up next to Jonathan and becomes latched to him forever. So it just has this 8 kind of big bark and scary looking bite. But really, once you get past that surface layer, you're like, oh no, there's a soft, cuddly, ferociously tender and loyal person under there. So anyway, oh yes, Lisa. Oh good, Lisa, I see that we typed to them similarly. Jonathan has a 5. Or Jonfin. Lisa, I love it. So Lisa wrote Jonfin, which is how Alex pronounces Jonathan's name throughout the movie. Jonfin. Again, it's a delightful film, people. Just trust me on this. So Lisa, thank you for that. I agree with you. Okay, moving on to the next question. I got to find what question I'm on and what button I'm on. Here we go. This question is, where did you see Jesus and or Christ in the film? And if you're just sort of tuning in with us and you haven't been a part of this series, we give ourselves freedom to go either way with this. Where did you see Christ? Which is to say, where did you see this sort of universal manifestation of divine love? And or where did you see maybe the historical person of Jesus, this rabble-rousing rabbi from Nazareth who fought against injustice and called people to a radical new way of humanity? And this question, this is what I was most excited to share with you. This is why this is normally our first question, and I moved it here towards the end. This is what I want to share. So if you've totally tuned out or just sort of half listening, I invite you to come back in here just for a minute. Because this is kind of one of the main things I want to talk about here today. Here's what I'll say to this question. As far as I understand it, and again, I could be wrong. As far as I understand it, Jesus did not see his life as being primarily for or about himself. Rather, he saw himself as part of a larger story that was being told, a larger movement of which he willingly gave himself unto. So let me talk about that for a minute. Many of us, myself included, were told a version of the following story. So if you have any sort of religious, conservative, fundamental background, then I imagine you can relate to some version of this story that I'm about to tell you. And it goes like this. In the beginning, God created everything. And God created humans as the apex of creation. We were given the earth to rule over and to enjoy, and we were originally created flawless. We just woke up on day 6. We woke up like this, just with no sin. We were flawless. However, due to an unfortunate incident with a snake and some fruit, humans fell from this perfect state of grace. For disobeying God, they were cast out of Eden, cast out of paradise forever, cursed with separation from their Creator. As a result, from that time on, every human that would ever be born would also then be born into this state of sin, capital S sin, which meant they were always in a state of being separated from God. Why? Because as the story goes, God is perfect and holy and by rules that I guess he created and held himself to, can only also be close to things that are perfect and holy. And since humans were no longer either one, and God had to keep his distance. However, God did still love humanity, although it was kind of a twisted and confused love, because at one point in the story, he murdered every human on the face of the earth except for one family. But nonetheless, God still had some fondness for humanity. And so he liberated a tribe of people. He liberated the Israelites out of slavery from the Egyptians. And he chose them to be the ones that would reveal the true character of God to all the world. And it was to this tribe of people that God gave the 10 Commandments, as well as a bunch of other commandments, but I just don't think they could all fit on the tablets. And these commandments, these laws, were designed to help humans live in such a way where they could be in harmony with each other and harmony once again with the divine. Yes, there was still separation from God, there was still separation, but there were now measures that humans could take to overcome the separation or to bridge the gap, even if only temporarily. And primarily this was done through the ritual of sacrifice, sacrificing bulls, goats, birds, etc. Now, I'll pause here and say if I were to tell you a more accurate version of this story that I was given, I'd be much harsher on the Israelites, much harsher as it relates to the law and the Old Testament and the Torah. Because a lot of Christians and a lot of denominations, they have this real inaccurate perception of the Hebrew people, this real inaccurate perception of the law. It's very anti. So there's this stream of sort of, well, certainly anti-Semitic. That's certainly been true within the Christian tradition. But even more so, this gross characterization of Jewish religion and Judaism and Old Testament. But I just don't feel like being that honest this morning. So just sort of saying it as how I think it is. I'm breaking from the story as I was told to tell the story a little bit, which is that the law were given to the Israelites as a way to be in harmony with each other and with the divine. Okay, back to the story that many of us were told. So since the beginning of the fall, capital F fall, beginning of the fall of humans, it was believed that God would one day send a savior to fix everything, which has always been a bit weird. Like if the fall happened and everything was broken and God's like, I'm going to send a savior one day, why wait so long? I don't know, but these are the thoughts that occurred to me as a young child, but I never really had a chance to articulate them. But it was believed that one day God would send a savior to fix everything, a Messiah who would bridge the divide between the pure, holy God on one side and the depraved, fallen, sinful people on the other. But the only way this could be done, it was believed, was with a blood sacrifice, because it was taught that without the shedding of blood, there would be no forgiveness of sin. But it's even more complicated than that, because not any blood will do. Because for hundreds and thousands of years, the blood of goats, which is a combination of goats and bulls, which is why it was so hard. They couldn't find any goats. It was not, that blood ultimately could not bridge because the blood was not pure. So it had to be this pure, unblemished blood, untainted by the fall. Only this, I guess, could be what makes God no longer angry with sinners. So enter, as the story goes, Jesus, who it was also taught was 1/3 of an eternal God, who had been in existence for all of eternity, but in the year 0 AD, took off his divine suit and put on a human suit. Jesus came to earth in a miraculous way through the virgin birth because, again, it had to be pure blood. And since sin is passed on from the Father, you're welcome, you had to skip the Father part in order to ensure that the blood was pure and holy. Which, by the way, is why the Catholic Church, in part, eventually said that Mary was also born without sin, so that Jesus could really, truly just come into the world completely pure and free of any of the fallen state of sin. And the story says that even though Jesus did some nifty things and said some nifty things while he was alive, really his only purpose was to die. His only reason, the story goes, for being alive was to give up his life as a perfect blood sacrifice, which could officially and finally atone for the sins of humanity. This is the story of a God who created humanity 6,000 years before this moment and had been patiently waiting to finally be given the right dosage of meds to calm his anger down. And the right dosage of meds, as it turns out, came through the blood of his own son. And the story that we were told ends with Jesus then coming back from the dead, which, to be honest, was always just kind of a bit of a bonus after party to the main event. The main event was his crucifixion. The resurrection was cool and all because it helps validate the crucifixion, and it was kind of like, oh yeah, this will happen to you one day too. But again, the main thing here is that Jesus, as the story goes, died to pay the price for your sin so that God can finally be okay with being in your presence. But there's a catch. There's always a catch, right? There's a catch to this arrangement. This payment of sin was not automatic. Was not automatic. As the story goes, it only works if you believe it works. Kind of like flying in Peter Pan. You have to believe it in order for it to be effective. The story says that God will only accept you as acceptable if you make a confession of belief that yes, you indeed are a sinner worthy of eternal hell, but you believe that Jesus died on your behalf, therefore satisfying the payment to a perfect God that you could never actually pay on your own. And so now, instead of God pouring out his wrath on you, it can all be redirected onto the cross of Calvary and onto his son. And if you make the correct belief in the correct amount of time, using the correct amount of words, then one day you could pass through the pearly gates with your Jesus-shaped Fast Pass badge. This is the story that many of us were given. And I get it. I was tongue-in-cheek with with parts of it, in part because I just can't really tell the story with a straight face very much anymore, because so much of it, to me, is not a good story. So much of it, to me, is not a real story, capital R, real story. And so part of my self-defense mechanism to separate me from this story is to say it with a bit of humor and poking fun at it as I go, kind of to create this separation a bit. But friends, it's not a good story. It's not a good story. More than that, I think it's not even an accurate story. And a lot of my personal work over the last several years, and a lot of the work we've done here at our church, Sojourn Grace Collective, is to try and excavate a better story, try and tell a better story. And in my opinion, one that is actually even closer to the reality, maybe, of those who have gone before us. A couple weeks ago in the Sunday service about the Princess Bride, I did share a bit about Jesus and sort of this movement that he gave himself to. So I'm not going to reiterate it here. If you're curious, you can go back and watch that portion. But I believe that Jesus gave his life up for something, but not for what many of us were taught. Not as some sort of cosmic settling of debt. Not as some sort of blood diamond offered to satisfy the wrath of a perfect and perfectly angry God. Rather, I believe that Jesus gave up his life because really it was the natural, and you might even say inevitable outcome of his commitment and passion to see the kingdom of God come on earth as it is in heaven. He gave up his life, yes, but in many ways it might be more accurate to say it was taken from him by those whose power was threatened by his ideas. And yes, ultimately Jesus did acquiesce to the loss of his life. He said yes to that. Because for him, I think, the calling of God on his life, and you could interpret God there however you want, and the sentence still is true for me. Because the calling of God on his life to show people a different way, what a different way of being human could look like, this call ultimately was everything to him. So to go back to the movie here, Everything is Illuminated. At the end of the film, the woman that they find in this house, surrounded in a sea of gorgeous sunflowers, whose name is Lita. And she turns out to be the sister of Augustine, the young woman in the photograph that Jonathan was given by his grandmother. At the end of the movie, this woman, who was the sole survivor of the massacre of her village, Thrakenbrod, from the Nazis, this woman gave Jonathan this wedding ring. It was inside a little jar, and it was buried under the ground. And the wedding ring belonged to Augustine, who had originally been betrothed to Jonathan's grandfather in this Jewish village. And so this old woman, now the sole survivor of this village, gives this ring to Jonathan. And originally, Jonathan and Alex think, this ring was buried and preserved so that we would remember the village. We would remember Augustine. We would remember the people that lived here. And Lita, Augustine's sister, said, I don't think that's what it was. I don't think that's why my sister buried this and told me where to find it. She says this at the end of the film. She says, no. This ring does not exist for you. You exist for it. You have come all this way. You have come across the world because this ring exists. If this movie were a parable that I had to write, it might go something like this. For what is the kingdom of heaven like? It is like a wedding ring, sealed in a glass jar, buried in the ground, where once there lived an entire village, so that those who search for it might, in finding the ring, find the truth about themselves as well. I believe Jesus knew that his life did not exist for him. Rather, he existed for life, capital L, life, which is to say, he consciously chose to align his story with this larger story about what it means to be alive, what it means to be human, what it means to be connected with each other and with God. And he gave himself to that idea. He gave himself to that story. And in that way, you could say that the story is what called to him. It beckoned him to come and be a part of it, to give himself to it. As far as I can tell, this is what I think life, capital L, life, does for me and maybe for all of us. It calls to us with a story, hoping that we might come to it because it exists. And this story is one of wholeness and peace and justice and mercy and compassion. It is indeed a story of love. And it invites us to search for it. And in our search, in our very rigid quest, we just might find who we really are along the way. All right, I'll pause there.
Luana says, please write that parable.
Oh, I will write that parable. Thank you. Yes.
Lisa says she saw Christ in the woman's patience and knowing that someone would come back at some point.
I love that. Lisa, thank you. So Lisa said that she saw Christ in the woman's patience, knowing that someone would come back, like their loss would not be lost, that it would not be all for nothing.
Lilia says they couldn't find any goats because they didn't make it onto Noah's Ark.
She says what?
They couldn't find any goats.
Oh, they could. Okay, thank you, Lilia. They couldn't find any goats to make it onto the ark. That's why no more goats exist for sacrifice.
And everybody still wants to talk about the ending.
Okay, what do you want to talk about the ending? What is it about the ending?
Here's the thing. Are you ready? Hold on.
What is it about the ending?
So,
what are your thoughts?
They didn't like the ending. They didn't like the way that they were confused at first. They didn't like the way the suicide was presented, like the grandfather was finally content.
Yes.
With a solid
Okay.
answer. It didn't feel redemptive.
Oh, interesting.
There was no redemption in his death. Not that there has to be. But
Okay.
I felt like that would have been better.
All right, so some people, again, this is all spoiler alert, which is part of the point here. But at the end of the movie, after the grandfather he unearths the story of himself that he had severed from years ago. He had disconnected. So the truth was that the grandfather grew up in the village Thrakenbrod. And when the Nazis came through and wiped out the entire village, he survived one of the executions and walked away. And there's this scene of him leaving and taking off this jacket with the Jewish star and throwing it in the pile. And you can just see that's the moment where he distanced himself from his people, distanced himself from his true identity. Lives his whole life, has kids, has grandkids, and nobody knows that they are Jewish. And then at the end of the film, as they come back to this city, and he comes back and he sees again this woman that he grew up with in this village, he has this sort of, the redemptive moment for me is being reconnected with his true identity. It's being reconnected to who he really is. It's for the first time in, 60, 70 years, he shed the lies that he'd been telling about himself, and he reconnected with who he was. And I get that I totally understand that maybe he then goes and he takes his own life in this sort of, I guess, peaceful way. I don't know how else to describe the movie was meant to convey. It was a peaceful way. His wife had already passed away, and so he just sort of gave up his life. And I totally get why that would maybe not be everybody's cup of tea for obvious reasons. But the grandson narrates that moment, and he says that, for the first time he saw his grandfather at peace. And I'm not advocating here for giving up of your life. What I am saying is that there is this connection with the truth of who you really are that I think brings a type of peace that cannot be found in any other way. And that sort of peace, that sort of connection, had this ripple effect then to Alex and to the rest of the family. And again, I said it earlier, but the final scene where they bury the grandfather in full ownership of their Jewish roots, the full ownership of their story. And so maybe now this family has a chance at finding peace that they really had been unable to find because they've been living so disconnected from their true identity. So yes, the ending I think it is meant to disrupt us and maybe wake us up a bit, but it woke me up to this powerful truth of what happens when you can be connected with your true identity. So that was what I thought. Okay. There was one more question. Had this movie illuminate the meaning of life? I'm going to skip it because I just feel like I've said enough already. But for me, the meaning of life is about the very rigid search of becoming who we are meant to be, the very rigid search of reconnecting with our true identity, of reconnecting with who we really are. Seek and you shall find, knock and the door shall be opened. The movie is titled Everything is Illuminated because at the very end, the narrator, Alex, says, everything is illuminated in the light of the past. And I think in some ways, this is what it means to find meaning in life, is to look at your past, to uncover all of it, all the shadows, all the parts you've been trying to hide, and let that illuminate for you what is most true, what is most real, so then you can be connected with who you really are. And who are you really, my friends? You are really a loved child of God. So I'm going to invite the band to come share a song with us. I'll come up here in a minute to lead us in our communion ritual. But thank you for engaging with me in Everything is Illuminated.
I'm deep in the comments now, so I'm just going to keep sermoning, if that's okay, for just a second. Because I hear you. I hear what everybody is saying, how, yes, that a suicide is a bad reaction to finding your peace. But I think that suicide is reflecting the reality that when we don't have Jesus' mission of kingdom of God on earth, when we do not have a reality that allows people to be in their true identity, what we get is death. That is the death that we get. And so for me, that speaks to that symbolism. And instead of saying, to find your peace, you must commit suicide, I think the onus is on us to create a world where that isn't necessary, to keep leaning into that story, to keep leaning into that mission of creating that space, because it isn't yet. We're on our way there, though, and there's hope in that. The redemption is in that hope that we can keep working toward that goal and keep trying to get there. So that's my take on the redemptive suicide debate. And I love you all, and I love the way you think so much.
Got all that emotion that's heaving like an ocean. You're drowning in a deep, dark well. Can hear it in your voice that if you only had a choice, you would rather be anyone else. But I love you just the way that you are. I love the way love shapes your precious heart. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. I know it's hard to hear it when that anger in your spirit is pointing like an arrow at your chest. The voices in your mind are anything but kind. You can't believe your mother knows best. I love you just the way that you are.
Love the way love's shaping your heart. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself.
Be kind to yourself. I don't want to force my ideas on the movie onto anybody, especially as it relates to the topic of suicide, which is layered and complicated and nuanced. And yeah, Lisa, you said that is a bad response to finding peace, and you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I completely affirm that. So it gives us stuff to think about. It gives us things to consider, to draw us deeper into these conversations. If you have your elements with you, again, I got this honey wheat bread. I invite you to take it, and if you're able to, maybe rip a piece off, small piece. I don't know, however big a size of piece you want. Rip off a piece. And what I like to do sometimes is just sort of hold these two next to each other and realize that this small piece only existed because it came from the large piece. That it is all connected. It is all part of one. And we all are all connected. We are all one. There isn't some segment of humanity that is more, that is better or pure or closer to God or any of that. We are all loved children of God. So I invite you to take this morning, maybe with this sense that all the people that are really hard for you to love right now, people who are most different from you, politically, theologically, relationally, ideologically, whatever it is, people who are most different from you and are really hard to love right now, I invite you to take this, maybe just reminding yourself that both they and you are loved children of God. And then I'm going to take my cup, which was originally probably a decently cold juice. Now it's going to be real warm. It's guava juice. And I invite you to this morning consider how that story that we told earlier, the story that many of us were given, which is that there is no forgiveness of sins without the shedding of blood. And that you can only be right with God because of the blood that Jesus shed. But these stories are not good stories to tell. They're not good stories. That instead, maybe what's a better and I would say truer story is that you were and are and never will be separated from God. And that maybe the sacrifice of Jesus is, as the book of Hebrews says, the once and for all sacrifice, which is not to say it's finally the one that we've all been waiting for, the perfect one, but maybe it's to say it's the one that can finally say, can we be done with this now? Can we put this way of thinking behind us? Can we wake up to maybe that's not true? So I invite you to take whatever you have as your cup this morning as a reminder that you are not, have not ever been, and never will be separate from God.
Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. And how does it end when the war that you're in is just you against you against you? Gotta learn to love, learn to love, learn to love your enemies too. Expect to be perfect, it's a fight you gotta forfeit. You're a part of me, whatever you do. So lay down your weapon, darling, take a deep breath and believe that I love you. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. Oh, be kind to yourself. Gotta learn to love, learn to love.
love your enemies too. I love that line. Laura, thanks for this last comment here. Laura writes, I haven't watched it yet, but it sounds like the old man finally found the peace that he never had and was ready to be at rest. I wouldn't frown on that. And then, Lilia, earlier you said that for you, the grandfather found redemption when the woman asked, is the war over yet? And he said yes, and he grabbed her hand and kissed it. And it was as though he was saying, yes, World War II is over, and the war within his own divided self was also over. So I love it. Speaking of Lilia, there's a parable that Jesus tells of the persistent old widow who knocked and knocked at the judge's door and would not relent until the judge opened and gave her peace. And the judge said to himself, fine, I will just open the door if for no other reason so that this woman goes away. In a similar way, Lilia, I would like to announce that next Sunday, this will be our final week in the Meaning and Movie series. Next Sunday, we are indeed going to do Inside Outs. So Lilia, I'm really excited for you and for us because it's a fantastic movie. So if you haven't seen it, please watch Pixar's Inside Out. We'll talk about it next Sunday. If you have seen it, but it's been a while, rewatch it so that it's fresh in your mind. Lilia, thank you for your patience and your grace and your persistence in encouraging us to watch and rewatch this. Yeah, she's like, is this happening? Is it really happening? Yes, it's really happening. I assume it's on Disney Plus. It's a Pixar movie, so I think all the Pixar movies are there. So yes, thank you, Matthew. Okay, so we're now going to move. Oh no, I've got 2 house notes. First is that we're going to do beer and hymns right here in this room, hopefully a little less sweatily, on Friday, September 18th. So that'll be at 7 o'clock on Friday on the Facebooks and the YouTubes. We'll do beer and hymns. That'll be a ton of fun. And then also, I'm going to start a Tuesday night virtual small group that's going to go through, speaking of parables, it's going to talk about parables. And it is going to be, at least in the beginning parts, it's going to be a little on the academic side. Like I really want to dig into, yeah, shocker, thank you, I feel known. But it is going to be a bit / academic theological in the beginning, and then we're going to sort of, as we go, unearth some of the real practical aspects of it. But I'm really excited, y'all. I have not scratched that sort of scholastic itch in a while, and so as I've been prepping that scholastic itch, I've been scratching it, and it's been feeling great. So that's gonna start in September. I'll get signups this week going, but that's open to anybody who wants to join, whether you are a regular part of Sojourn or you're just tuning in or you hear this on the podcast, whatever. You can join. It'll be a Zoom group on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock on the parables. Okay. This is our benediction, and we say this every week at the end of our gathering. It's an invitation to go forth this week in bravery because you are a loved child of God. That is your true identity. Nothing can take that from you. Nothing can touch it. And also, like that song just said, be kind because everyone else is also a loved child of God. So if you will follow, then I will lead, my friends. Be brave.
Because you are a child of God.
And be kind.
Because so is everyone else.
I love you. Have a good week. Stay safe. Stay cool. Bye. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to hit the button.
Yeah, you get end.
End.
It's weird.